Daniel Noboa has stolen the Ecuadorian election. And this is over at Gray Zone. Daniel Noboa's electoral theft will cement the cartel and corporate control of Ecuador. President Daniel Noboa appears to have stolen Ecuador's election. He's now poised to consolidate control of a system that has benefited cartels and multinational corporations, including his family business, at the expense of average Ecuadorians. And Washington likes what it sees. You know what else? He's a fucking American. He was born in the United States, and he's a U.S. citizen, an American, a ruling elite American. Ecuador's National Electoral Council proclaimed incumbent president Daniel Noboa the winner of the presidential runoff, a result that his challenger, the left-wing Luisa Gonzalez, denounced as massive fraud. Gonzalez, who led several polls by up to 6 points as of Friday, has demanded a vote-by-vote recount. But the U.S. and many other countries that want to keep this right-wing oligarch in power are quickly acknowledging this election as legitimate. She pointed to irregularities, but included, but were not limited to, 18 polling stations in her stronghold were relocated at the last minute. False positives of ballots that forced the closure of polling stations where she held a wide lead. Banning of several foreign observer groups. Martial law imposed in 7 provinces favorable to Gonzalez. The denial of voting rights to all Ecuadorians residing in Venezuela. Noboa's illegal campaigning office would be good. Campaigning while in office in defiance of court orders. She presented copies of altar ballots showing irregularities and lacking the required validating signatures. These ballots were counted and somehow always favored Noboa. So that's one of those key things, is if there are a certain type of unusual ballots, if they all go in one direction, that kind of tells you something. If it just had to do with there was a problem with getting the signatures, or some polling stations forgot to tell people to sign the ballots, or whatever it was, then there should be ballots on both sides because it was a mistake by the polling office or what have you. And therefore, all the ballots in that area at that time didn't get signed, and therefore both sides. If it all goes one way, then there is something more going on, right? These strange events mirror earlier complaints of fraud, which were clearly documented with photos and videos from the first round of voting. Noboa's victory reflects the dominance of an elite rooted abroad. Born in Miami, the sitting president is the scion of a family empire embedded in the system of global capitalism and operating with complete impunity. As revealed in the Panama Papers, his family business includes Lanfranco Holdings, which was linked to 3 failed cocaine shipments. Come on, man. Seriously? Failed cocaine shipments? Get your shit together. Those need to be successful cocaine shipments, okay? Don't say I can't, say I can, all right? Noboa-owned companies owe $98 million in taxes to the country he now governs, and he has publicly stated he's not going to pay. Pretty similar to Donald Trump. Noboa's tenure follows the neoliberal shift overseen by former presidents Lenin Moreno and Guillermo Lasso. Moreno, but also notoriously was the one who sold out Julian Assange. You might recall that Julian Assange picked the Ecuadorian embassy to go into to flee his persecution, and he picked that because Correa was the president, and they would support him, and they did. And then Moreno comes into office, and Moreno sells him out rather quickly. As for why Moreno did that, other than just being a piece of shit, is Ecuador, within days of him doing that, got like a $4 billion World Bank loan. So he did it for the Benjamins. Noboa's tenure follows the neoliberal shift. Moreno and Lasso, who unleashed a wave of austerity on the country, hollowing out public services and state institutions while cooperating with Washington's national security agenda, most notably the surrender of Julian Assange to British authorities. Ecuadorian investigative journalists Andres Duran and Anderson Boscan have methodically exposed links between the state and the cartels, which transformed Ecuador into a hub for drug trafficking and money laundering while plunging its society into violence. But the journalistic duo's reporting soon forced them to flee in exile to save their lives, highlighting the risk that dissenters face in Ecuador nowadays. The resulting atmosphere of violence and austerity keeps the population in a state of shock. To keep working-class Ecuadorians from seeking an alternative among the nationalist left represented by Gonzalez, they've invoked the boogeyman of socialist Venezuela as a cautionary tale. warning that any break from the neoliberal model imposed by Washington will lead to economic ruin. Noboa has targeted street gangs, but left the cartel's financial structures untouched. So he could run around saying he's, tough on crime by targeting street gangs, but he's leaving the actual powerful cartels completely fine because he's one of them. The toxic presence of the Miami-born Noboa and his corruption-stained, ruinous tenure has managed to unite left and right-wing factions against him in support of Gonzalez. Just a week before the election, most of the polls showed Gonzalez leading by up to 6 points and trending upwards. Her surge followed a dominant debate performance in which she hammered the president over the documented ties between his family business and the cartels and challenged him, I love this, to take a drug test right here after the debate. A visibly shaken Noboa ignored the challenge and changed the subject. Here are the polls in the days leading up to the election. Gonzalez at 52.8%, Noboa at 47.1%, Maluk, Gonzalez at 53.4%, Noboa at 46.5%, Ideamos. Gonzalez at 52.1%, Noboa at 47.8%, Pedro Congo, Gonzalez at 52.1%, Noboa at 47.9%. Most of them show Gonzalez leading. Noboa's alleged fraud was made possible by a fundamentally corrupted electoral system. Ecuador's Central Election Council, known as CNE, is run by Diana Adamante, whose brother, Carr, was appointed by Noboa to a diplomatic position as Ecuador consul in Queens, New York. Among the 5 electoral council members, 4 are government loyalists. So basically, the council that decides whether the election was legit is almost entirely owned by Noboa. Noboa's public prosecutor, Diana Salazar, and I think I covered this story when it was reported, has selectively targeted political opponents while shielding Noboa's associates, including banks tied to Lasso and Noboa, from money laundering probes. You may be wondering, well, what is the U.S. interest in this? Yes, the U.S. likes right-wingers in general. Even when a Democrat is in the Oval Office, they still like these horrific right-wing governments. Big fan, big fan. But other than that, why do they love Noboa? Well, he's also American. He's also ruling elite. He's also rich as fuck. He's also part of the cartels. For all those reasons, they love Noboa. But here's another one. In 2022, the U.S. signed a bilateral treaty with Ecuador, allowing it to install unlimited military bases with full legal immunity for personnel. In the days before the 2025 election, anonymous intelligence officials from the Trump administration stated that they preferred Noboa over Gonzalez because he had guaranteed them permanent military basing rights. Man, that's so based. That's so based of them to just love having military bases there. That's so based. Their declaration helps explain why Washington has been so quick to recognize Noboa's victory. Gonzalez's recount demand challenges a powerful Miami-based elite, which hovers far above local institutions, imposing its will on millions of Ecuadorians without their consent. Consider this, and I love this deep dive into their history. Alvaro Noboa, the current president's father, studied alongside Winthrop Rockefeller and King Farouk II of Egypt at a private school in Switzerland. That's the level of wealth and influence behind Daniel Noboa. And they found this creepy photograph of Alvaro Noboa frolicking at the Swiss Academy with Winthrop Rockefeller. It's a big club, folks, and you ain't in it. If Noboa is able to pull off the heist of the presidential election, he will cement total control over what's left of the state, leaving Ecuador at the intersection of cartel infiltration, corporate exploitation, and U.S. geopolitical dominance. Noboa is a U.S. citizen. Like every American citizen, he has sworn to defend the U.S. above all other nations. His second term will enable him to make good on that oath. So the U.S. is basically rigging and taking over yet another Latin American country. I talk a lot on this show about de-dollarization, about the U.S. Losing hegemony. And one of the areas that they're losing their hegemony, obviously, is Latin America. And they work very hard. Our ruling elite, our CIA, our Donald Trump, and the rest work very hard to continue to essentially be the puppet masters of countries in Latin America. And sometimes one will get out of their grasp and then they bring it back in the fold. And sometimes one will get out of their grasp, they bring it back in, and then they get out of their grasp again. Example, Bolivia. Bolivia, leftist government, then it is couped by the U.S. using lawfare and other tactics. Bolivia is couped. They put in a far right-wing Christian nationalist government, but it only lasts a year because the elections weren't rigged enough. The Bolivian people stood up and fought back, and now that coup that was successful by the U.S. is no longer successful. Another example, the biggest one, would be Venezuela. Venezuela is a country that is definitely on the American dartboard, and they did coup. They have couped Venezuela. The most recent successful coup of Venezuela by the U.S. empire was 2002. They successfully arrested Chavez, took him out of the presidential palace, and it was only because of, some lucky moments and some lucky loyal guards in the presidential palace, etc., and the people storming the streets, that Chavez was only ripped out of power for 2 days, and I think it was 2 days, maybe it was 3, and was able to get his presidency back. The U.S. has tried many more times to coup Venezuela, but has failed in those. And why with some countries are they kind of, they've got a lighter touch, like color revolutions, and then in Venezuela, they've got a more heavy-handed touch, like sending the Bay of Piglets, armed dudes on the beaches, showing up on the beaches of Venezuela? Well, Venezuela is more important to them. Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the fucking world. In the world. So do you think these U.S. parasites might find that enticing? Might think that's kind of important to them? Ecuador is important to them, to stopping the pink tide, as they call it, which was the socialist revolution of Latin America. And that socialist revolution so far continues to be successful in Venezuela and Cuba. There are maybe not quite socialist, but left-wing leaning governments in several other countries like Mexico. And there's a debate about whether Lula has sold out in Brazil. He's, I think many people always viewed him as quasi-neoliberal, but they viewed him as better than the fascist Bolsonaro. But of course, Lula was put into prison with the help of a U.S. lawfare coup. And now apparently Lula, at least in the Ecuadorian election rigging we're seeing here, apparently Lula has endorsed Noboa, the false winner of the election. So that doesn't look good for Lula. People who may know more about this may say that, Lula's sold out on some things and not others. I don't know. I'll let them speak to that.